Hello, my name is Heather Madrid, and this is my student presentation for week 2. The topic that I have selected is narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is a type of family and marriage therapy where a therapist helps a family take the narrative that they have or the story of their life or of events and reauthor that narrative to help them reach their goals. The main theorists for the therapy are Michael White and David Epstein, and they worked together to create the main tenets of the theory and to develop really the techniques. Michael White, he began doing therapy in the 1970s, and he received his degree in a university in Australia, and he really used a couple other theorists to build off of their ideas to develop the idea that people focused on how they retold what had happened to them through stories and through their own narrative. And by looking at that narrative in a different way, it could change future behaviors and improve the quality of life for the individuals or the family or a couple. And David Epstein, he met Michael White in the 70s. He went on to become the co-director of a family therapy center, and he agreed with what Michael White was researching and developing, and he worked with him to help create what would become narrative therapy. The main techniques or the tenets of the therapy are first and foremost that it is about people's stories and about the narrative, not necessarily the actual events that occurred. So by taking a look at the way the narrative is and not necessarily the actual history, a therapist could help a family reach their goals. And this could be any number of goals, conflict resolution, improved quality of life, communications, dealing with a traumatic event, or just regular everyday disputes. So other tenets of the therapy are also using logical or narrative reasoning instead of logical reasoning. The idea of this is taking and looking at events in a meaningful way instead of in a traditional or logical way. So instead of taking an event at face value for what the event was, it's looking at how that event is told within the family or by the individual to see really how they characterize the event. So if a car accident is told in a very dramatic or very negative, very dark way, looking at that event and recategorizing maybe the impact that it had on someone's life or the impact it had on the family, maybe focusing on things like how it brought the family together, or focusing on how the family realized that they value each other, things like that, characterizing the narrative in a different light instead of focusing on something that would be harmful to the family or something that would be harmful towards the individual. Another tenet of the theory is reauthoring. This is the main goal of the therapist while helping the family. This means taking those events and then helping them look at them in a new way, or looking at patterns of behavior in a new way for the future. So as a whole, the therapy doesn't really focus on explaining past events or focus on the past, but it does take the story of how things have happened in someone's life and how they view them and reauthor those. So it may not be interested in reliving or redealing with or kind of bringing up old events just for the sake of going through them, but it would take feelings that have been created from the story and the retelling, and it would reauthor those feelings or those stories. A big part of the therapy as well, another tenet, is externalizing. And externalizing means taking the problems and putting them into words. It's taking all of the family's concerns or the couple's concerns and actually voicing them and putting them into a named or categorized problem. The techniques of the theory, they all support these tenets. So the first technique is externalizing itself. So by externalizing the problem, a therapist can help the family to detach the problem from one specific individual, or recognize what the problem is. So let's say that there's a couple who have had multiple problems financially. They've filed for bankruptcy, they have a spouse out of work, they don't have the skills to do a budget, and they have a large amount of debt. Well, those individual stressors, all related to money, they may put on each other or blame each other for, instead of just looking at objectively as a problem. So by externalizing those problems, the therapist may be able to help them look at that problem and categorize it as maybe the money problem. So the couple can then take the pressure off each other for blaming one another for maybe one of them not being able to do a budget and the other one creating debt, and instead tackle the problem together as the money problem and really focus on a solution for the money problem. Another technique is to ask questions about how the problem affects the people and the people affects the problem. So in the money problem situation, this would mean, instead of asking the wife how the husband putting them in debt made her feel, it would be asking her how the money problem as a whole made her feel. And this could evoke a whole different set of responses as to where maybe if it was her husband, she would say, it makes me feel like he doesn't provide for me, or he doesn't support me, or he's not listening. But if you say, well, how does the money problem make you feel? Then you may get a set of responses like stressed, or like I'm confused, like I don't have control. And it can be focused towards the problem itself and creating a solution instead of towards an individual. Another technique with this theory can be predicting setbacks and raising dilemmas. So with this, it can kind of set expectations for future problems, and it can help develop a plan for if something goes wrong. This is almost preventative, and it can help a family also stay objective for if a problem comes up in the future and how they view it and how they deal with it. And also it can prepare them for a problem that they have externalized if it changes. So they're not so focused on just one small piece of it. So let's say, for example, the money problem again, that the therapist could throw out, well, what would you do if you had an emergency? Like, how would you feel? What would happen if you had an emergency tomorrow and you needed to come up with a large sum of money? This may be something that the couple hasn't considered, or a fear that is that could be very real to them. But if they're able to discuss it in therapy, they may be able to problem solve with each other and with the therapist. So that way, if a problem does come up, they feel more prepared. So it doesn't trigger this narrative to come forward that they just they can't get ahead. They can't ever fix it. They're just doomed. They're terrible with money. Instead, it's reauthoring that idea to, we have a plan in place for money, we're working on it, we're getting better, we're developing habits, and it's changing how they view their prior struggles with money in the future. Another technique is letters and celebratory acts, or like certificates of achievement. Letters can be impactful from the therapist to the family by giving them a synopsis or a written brief statement of how a therapy session went, maybe reiterating important pieces that the therapist really wants the family to remember and to know, or to practice, things that were good or things that were very memorable. And this can help the family to take something with them when they leave therapy that they can think about and they can go back to throughout the week or the 2 weeks before the next session, that the family members can share or discuss again. Celebratory acts and letters of achievement, those are for if something's accomplished in therapy that wouldn't normally be recognized anywhere else, that is a significant achievement for the family or the couple towards a goal. So this could be getting over a jealousy problem, getting over an anger problem. This could be setting goals, any kind of goal that has been set that the family has made serious progress towards or has accomplished could be put in a certificate and celebrated by the therapist in some way towards the family to recognize that they have accomplished something through the sessions. The application of the techniques and the tenets for the therapy look a little bit like this. A family comes in or a couple comes in and they tell the therapist what their main problems are, what they would really like to work on. The therapist then takes all of those collective problems and they help to rank them in order of importance. So the most pressing problem and what they will really focus on kind of down and really organize the client's thoughts. Once that has happened, then the therapist will help them externalize what the problems are, and they will verbalize what they believe the problems are to get a solid list of the actual issues in an externalized form. Once the issues have been externalized and everyone recognizes the common problems and what they're working towards, then the therapist will use the techniques such as asking questions or recognizing how people affect the problem and the problem affects the people, and using letters and celebratory acts to help the therapy continue progressing and help the family to rewrite or co-author, to reauthor. The therapist helps them co-author a new narrative for their current situation within the family and for the family's future. After that, then the family, really the final part is them practicing and reinforcing the new narrative and really taking it on their own. Moving forward, it's the collaboration is a big piece of it. So it's not just the therapist with the individuals, but it's really the family learning this technique and being able to apply it to their life in the present and in the future. My personal thoughts on the theory, I thought it was really interesting. I have not had a theory like this that I've learned in class that had the basic ideas behind it that narrative theory has. I really liked that it's solution based and that it's focused on a goal and that the past plays a role, but it's not the primary role. I like that it's centered around the present and centered around the future. It reminded me the closest that of anything else I've learned was person-centered theory. The idea that it's more positive, or it feels more positive. It feels like it's based a little more in goal setting and positivity and changing the narrative and some of that storyline. I also really liked the role of the therapist as being a non-expert and someone there to help guide or assist. And unlike other therapies where the therapist acts as the almost like from a distance or from an arm's length as the expert, I personally like the theories that seem a little more personable. They seem a little closer. They seem a little more relatable, or they seem just a little warmer to the clients. The criticisms that I have of the theory, I'm not sure how receptive certain personalities would be. I know for myself, obviously, as soon as I read it, I applied it to my own life like most people would. I think that my husband would have a hard time with a theory like this, or my father would have a hard time with a theory like this. I think that they are very logical. They're very stats, numbers, facts, factual events type people, and looking at things in a different way would be very difficult for them because they just see something, they take it for what it is, and their narratives are very black and white. And I think that the certificates of achievement could feel almost juvenile. These are my final thoughts on the narrative theory. I really enjoyed learning about them, and I think there are definitely some benefits that I will remember moving forward and come back to. And yeah, I really enjoyed learning about it.